No! Well, at least it's not going to perform worse than this gaming laptop that's much cheaper than it. Right? But first, today's video is sponsored by Micro Center. Micro Center is hosting their June laptop sales event where you can buy this HP Victus with a 5060 in it for a massive $700 off. Austin, you're getting a Micro Center soon, TM. So sign up for a free 128 gig flash drive and to stay in the loop. Same goes for the Columbus, Ohio remodel. So click on the links for that and everything else, including Micro Center news, down below. Now, I was very disappointed by the price of the GameCube, even though it's not at all unexpected, considering that this dick almost definitely has RAM stocks that he's pumping. But I got especially worried when I went onto Best Buy and saw that you could buy this gaming laptop for considerably less money than the GameCube. So in today's video, we're going to find out if a cheaper gaming laptop outperforms the Steam machine. Now, quick disclaimer. I don't actually have a Steam machine on hand, so to compare the performance, I'm going to use Linus's benchmarks. Now, the reason why I specifically use some of Linus's benchmarks is because they used a bunch of games that I regularly use to test hardware, so it just makes sense in terms of my testing workflow. Now, in terms of specs, this Asus gaming laptop is actually a very interesting point of comparison to the Steam machine. Aside from the Steam machine's semi-custom AMD CPU and GPU, they both have 16 gigs of DDR5 and 8 gigs of video memory. Now, the laptop only has a single stick of RAM, which might shiv it in its Achilles tendons, but we could buy another 16 gig stick of DDR5 and have the total package still cost less than the Steam machine, which is kind of wild. In terms of GPU, the gaming laptop has an RTX 5050 in it. I'm not sure what the power draw is of the 5050 in this laptop, but we'll figure that out in the gaming tests. Now, the comparison is less balanced when it comes to I/O, although the one is basically a desktop system and the other one is a laptop. So obviously the Steam machine has much better I/O, but at least the laptop has some normal USB ports on it and HDMI. Now, another place where the Steam machine should absolutely dumpster the gaming laptop is in terms of thermals and noise. Because on the one hand, you have the Steam machine with a whole bunch of space for cooling and fans and stuff. And then on the other hand, you have a gaming laptop, which, yeah, there's that. Although on the other hand, the gaming laptop comes with a high refresh rate display and a keyboard just built into it, whereas the Steam machine, it doesn't even come with a bundled controller. At that price, it's an outrage! And then there's the fact that the Steam machine comes with SteamOS right out of the box, whereas the laptop comes with some Windows on it, which is a bit gross. But I will try and install Bazzite on the gaming laptop later in the video to try and even that playing field. Now, having said all of that, obviously this is a stupid comparison. They're two completely different products for different use cases, but I was still curious to see how the Steam machine compares to a gaming laptop that costs 400 Canadian dollars less. So let's get into some performance results, benchmarks, whatever. Let's check it out. Now, we're starting off our 4K testing with Cyberpunk using Ultra and Fidelity FX on performance. I don't think I understand why these settings are happening at 4K. Like, this is insanely not how I would run it, but these are the benchmarks that we're comparing it to, so let's see how it performs. Oh, look at that. Now, straight off the bat, we're getting just under 30 frames per second, and it's looking real blurry. Although having said that, considering that we're doing Fidelity FX at performance, it's kind of looking better than I was expecting. I guess part of that has to do with our base resolution not being absurdly low when we're upscaling to 4K. And don't get me wrong, the game does look like cheeks, but it's kind of running. And performance-wise, it's looking good for the Steam machine. The Linus test pegged an average of about 41 frames per second with these settings, which is quite a lot higher than what we're getting with the laptop here, although we will do the canned benchmark a bit later to get a more like-for-like comparison. Now, in terms of temperatures, it's also not going as abysmally as I was expecting. We're sitting in the 80s and the laptop isn't that noisy. Gamers Nexus did a bunch of very thorough thermal testing on their GameCube, and the results were very impressive. It was like low 40s with low noise, crazy stuff, but the laptop was never gonna win here. Now, I was also really interested to see what happens when we shift from Fidelity FX, which we have to use on the GameCube because of it being an AMD-based system, to DLSS. I'm curious, visually, if DLSS maybe looks a bit better. Using the tensor model, DLSS looks way better. There's less smearing behind the cars driving past, and there's just generally more detail retention. Although Cyberpunk still uses the older Fidelity FX3, so this isn't really a big surprise. Although interestingly, despite both running at performance, I was getting lower frame rates with DLSS. And then for some reason, when I tried the canned benchmark, I was getting way worse performance than I saw in-game. And considering that the GPU wasn't doing a whole lot, we were running headfirst into some bottleneck. I was also curious to see if I could dial in settings that kind of felt like they made more sense to me. So I'm gonna do medium, Fidelity FX on balanced so that we don't have to have as aggressive upscaling. And I also want to turn motion blur off. Wow, we're actually getting about 40 frames per second and we're using less upscaling. So the game feels a lot better. Like, I think in terms of playability, it is a very big difference. Yeah, I think these settings make more sense and it makes the game feel more playable. And visually, I actually think it looks better compared to the ultra settings because, well, we're using less upscaling. And then finally for Cyberpunk, I did the Linus 1080p test with everything on ultra settings and no upscaling. And again, Gabe wins here. It's not going great for the laptop so far, but we've still got more games to test. So let's see how it goes with Doom: The Dark Ages. Now with Doom: The Dark Ages, they again used 4K with performance FSR, but this time we get a low preset. Oh yeah, for Doom: The Dark Ages, we are getting 100% of our GPU utilization, so we don't have that same issue I had with Cyberpunk, and with that, we're getting not that different a frame rate to what you'd see on the GameCube. But considering that this is Doom: The Dark Ages, and it has really good frame pacing at low frame rates, it's not that terrible. Like, I wouldn't want to play the game like this. Like, I wouldn't say this is a usable experience, but it's not that bad. Now that we are using 100% of our GPU, the temperatures have gotten a lot worse. In terms of the final benchmark, the GameCube is still doing quite a bit better than the laptop. Bear in mind, I don't know where they did their testing, so take this result with a massive grain of salt. So now we're gonna do some more reasonable settings. They gave Doom: The Dark Ages running at 1080p medium, so let's switch to that. Here, the laptop actually managed to close the gap, which was surprising, although the 1% lows of the GameCube was still better than we saw with the laptop. Again, take these results with a grain of salt. With Forza Horizon 6 at 4K, we're doing the Fidelity FX thing on performance mode, and in the graphics preset they said they used was high. With Forza Horizon, we again have the issue of I don't know where Linus and them tested this game. So I'm gonna drive around a bit and we're gonna get an idea of what the performance is like, but it's very much not necessarily apples to apples that we're comparing here. The game is actually running surprisingly well here. So we've got 100% GPU utilization, and that translates to about 60-ish frames per second. It does dip lower than that, but it's pretty consistent, and that's with rain happening, which is like a particle effect that adds to the strain. So this is good. This is better than I thought it would be running it. Forza is the first game where the laptop actually beats the GameCube. But then the game crashed and I just couldn't get it to launch again, like never. So the laptop's victory was real short-lived here. Now finally, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a good game for this because there's a canned benchmark, and with 4K at the highest settings with CAS on 25%, we have an absolute shellacking. The GameCube's 1% low was better than the average of the laptop. Ouch. And then moving to 1080p without any cast, this story doesn't get a whole lot better. But maybe if we install Bazzite on the laptop, it'll help close this gap. Now the Bazzite installation process was real straightforward. I just downloaded the image off of Bazzite's website, specifying that I have an Asus laptop. And then when I plugged my Belina Etcher made bootable drive into the laptop, then I just followed some prompts, and just like that, we had Bazzite on our laptop. You just need to remember to turn drive encryption off in Windows before starting this process. But once I had Bazzite installed on the laptop, it just worked. I didn't have any issues with like trackpad drivers, which I was really impressed by. The biggest problem I ran into was I couldn't get the laptop to output video over HDMI. Apparently this issue has something to do with the Optimus power saving stuff, but I couldn't find any settings to turn this off in the laptop's BIOS or in the Nvidia drivers in Bazzite. But anyway, I jumped into Cyberpunk and tested it at 1080p because of the whole no external display thing. But moving to Bazzite, I actually lost frame rate. It wasn't a huge difference, but it still was slower than it was running on Windows. The same thing goes for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It wasn't a massive difference. I don't know if you'd subjectively be able to feel that difference, but it is there. Which means, luckily for the Steam machine, it does manage to outperform the gaming laptop that costs less than it. It doesn't outperform it a whole lot, and it is a 400 Canadian dollar difference. And the laptop has double the storage, but it is better. Which brings me to the end of the video. Let me know what you think of this performance and price difference down below. Subscribe to the channel on the way down there, and until the next video, thank you for watching. Bye bye.